Hello! Today we are going to do a comprehensive review of the simple, continuous, or progressive, and perfect verb tenses. If you do not yet know about any one of these tenses or tense groups, we're going to go through 9 today, then you should go back and look at one of our previous videos or have a conversation with an instructor in order to get more information. Because today is not a lesson in the sense that we're going to be going into depth. Today is a review. So, buckle up, get your notes ready, and try to keep up. Of course, you already know that verbs are important words in English. We need to have verbs in sentences. In order to make a sentence, you have to have at least one verb. There are 3 general times when we talk about verb tense. That's essentially all tense is. It's a block of time. It's a way of thinking about time. And we can talk about the past, we can talk about the present, or we can talk about the future in a variety of different ways. The first, and probably one of the most common, and maybe even one of the most important verb tenses, is the simple past tense. The simple past tense is the storytelling tense. It is the tense we use when we tell our parents what happened at school today. Obviously, we can't tell our parents things that did not already happen, and the simple past tense talks about finished events in the past. This tense is also important because this is the tense that defines, it tells you whether or not a verb is regular or irregular. Remember that a regular verb ends in these 2 letters all the time in the simple past tense. There's a number of ways you can get to these 2 letters, but every regular verb will end in these 2 letters, ed, in this verb tense, the simple past. This becomes very important later on. Obviously, if you have a verb that does not end in these 2 letters in the simple past, ed, that verb would be irregular. Something like ran or wrote. These are irregular verbs. They do not end in ed. If you need more on the simple past or regular and irregular verbs, you can check our video library. Maybe it's somewhere down here in YouTube, and you can get more information. Now, as far as the simple present tense goes, this can be confusing for a lot of students, because a lot of students think that the simple present is what you use when you talk about what you are doing right now. But that is not the case. We do not use the simple present to talk about what we are doing right now. Instead, we use the simple present to talk about things that we do all the time. The simple present is used to talk about habits or facts. Sometimes people talk about opinions, or they make general statements as though they are facts, and that's still generally the simple present tense. It is important to remember, in the simple present tense, we always have to be aware of subject-verb agreement, okay? The subject-verb agreement rule is an important rule to keep in mind, especially using the be verb, because this pesky be verb uses the subject-verb agreement rule in almost every tense. But every verb uses this rule in the simple present tense. The subject-verb agreement rule is pretty easy. If you have one person, place, thing, or idea, then when you add the simple present verb, it's going to have an S on the end. So you can remember singular subject, singular verb, and that singular verb is going to have that S on the end of the verb. As far as the plural verbs go, if I have a plural subject, then all I use for the verb is the bare infinitive. The bare infinitive is just the word that I would look up in this imaginary dictionary. So for example, if I have a single child, one child, I would say that child plays video games. If I have many children, more than one child, I would say these children play video games. Again, if you need more on this, you can consult your teacher or one of our previous videos. Let's move on to the simple future. The simple future, in fact, all of the future tenses, you have to remember there's always 2 ways in which you can make a future progression in tense. When we talk about the future, we're imagining what will or what is going to happen, okay? So obviously the future, well, depending on your beliefs, it is not written yet, so we're making our best guess. We're talking about what we think will happen in the future. The easiest way to do that is to do what I just did. Add this little word, will, and then use the bare infinitive. Remember, that's just the word that you're looking up in the imaginary dictionary. The second way in which to create the future tense is to use the construction be going to. Whenever we use this construction, be going to, you have to remember subject-verb agreement. It could be I am going to watch a movie later. It could be we are going to eat dinner. Or it could be he, she, or it is going to do something else. So, those are the simple verb tenses. And now we're moving on. So in moving on, we have now the continuous or the progressive verb tenses. Remember that these two words, continuous or progressive, they're interchangeable. They mean the same thing. And what they mean is that the verb has to have these three letters, ing. And it's important to remember that when you see verb ing, that you don't immediately think, oh, this is a verb tense, because it may not be a verb tense. In fact, in order for it to be a verb tense, it has to have the be verb first. So when you're looking at continuous tenses, you're always looking at be verb ing. And remember, the be verb always uses subject-verb agreement. So, in the past, was or were verb ing. I was just talking about the simple past, present, and future tenses. Okay, that was in the past. All of these continuous and progressive verb tenses are talking about ongoing action. They're not talking about moments in time. They're talking about an action that continued or progressed through a span of time. And that's the primary difference between the simple and the continuous or the progressive tenses. So, the only thing that's changing is whether or not these happened in the past. In the present, I am teaching and talking to you right now. This is that verb tense, the present progressive or present continuous, that most students confuse with the simple present. It's the present continuous we use to talk about what we are doing right now, okay? Because you can't do things in a moment. You do things over a course or over a span of time, and that is why when we're talking about what we are doing, we use this construction, the present continuous tense. That's the verb tense, to talk about what is happening right now. And if we can imagine about what we will be doing in the future, that is how we say it, okay? So the future progressive tense, same thing. Will plus be verb ing. Remember, when you have multiple word verb constructions, you only have to worry about any sort of changes in terms of subject-verb agreement and that kind of thing when you look at the very first word. So with will, it's really simple. Will be verb ing. This be doesn't change because it's the second word in the verb construction. However, be going to be verb ing, the first be is subject-verb agreement. The second be is not. That's part of the be verb ing. So, I am going to be eating dinner sometime after shooting this video because it's late in the afternoon. That's what I am going to be doing later. So, the progressive tenses are really the same ideas as the simple tenses, but we're taking ideas of actions and we're stretching them over time. So now we are at the perfect tense review. And to be honest, the perfect tenses are a little difficult, which makes them hard to understand perfectly, especially when you're just starting out. And if you have not yet studied the perfect tenses, you can find links below in which we go into more detail, sort of giving you more information about each of these perfect tenses. Because remember, this is a review video, and we're going pretty quickly. But the first thing you need to remember about the perfect tenses is that all of the perfect tenses use the past participle. So whether it's the past perfect, the present perfect, or the future perfect, each one of these tenses uses the past participle. What is the past participle? Well, I'm glad you asked. That is when this tense, the simple past, becomes really important. If the verb is a regular verb, and you should know that a regular verb is just a verb that ends in ed in the simple past tense, a verb like play. I played with my friends, or study. The students studied hard. Those are regular verbs. They end in ed. An irregular verb, like I ran all the way here, or I wrote a letter to my mother, those are irregular verbs. In the simple past tense, an irregular verb does not end in ed. Now, as far as past participles go, an ed verb does not change. Regular verbs have the exact same participle form as their simple past tense form. So if I studied, I could say I have studied or I had studied. We'll get to the have in just a moment, but just know studied is the past participle. But with verbs like run and write, the participle can be very different from the simple past tense form. The problem with these irregular verbs is, at present, they're just a list. You gotta kind of have to recognize and memorize. So I could say I have written many letters in the past, or I had run a race, and you'll hear that those are not the same words as I ran here, or I wrote a letter. Wrote, written. Ran, run. These irregular verbs, you have to memorize their participial forms. So the simple thing to remember when it comes to the perfect tenses is the word that changes at the beginning. All of the perfect tenses use the same kind of construction. Have as a verb plus the past participle of the active verb that you're using in the sentence. So in the past perfect, it's had, which is the past tense of the verb have, plus the past participle of your active verb. Then you have the present. Here you have to remember subject-verb agreement. It could be has, it could be have, plus the past participle of your active verb. Lastly, will have, plus the past participle. Or be verb, subject-verb agreement, be going to have, plus past participle, and these are your perfect tenses. It is the have verb that is the first word of the verb construction that you need to make sure follows past, present, or future. The past participle will be the same whether it is the past perfect, present perfect, or future perfect tense. Let's review.
Verb tenses review. Why are verbs perhaps the most important words in English? Every sentence needs at least one verb. What are the three basic ideas of tense? Past, present, future. Why is the simple past tense important? This tense defines whether or not a verb is regular or irregular. What is the function of the simple present tense? What does it not do? The simple present tense is used to talk about general ideas, habits, facts, etc. It does not talk about what is happening now. What is the subject-verb agreement rule? Singular noun equals singular verb plus s. Plural nouns equal plural verb, no s. What is true about the pattern for all progressive or continuous verb tenses? Be plus verb ing. All progressive continuous verb tenses must include the be verb before the main verb. When there is more than one word in a verb tense construction, which word or words may change according to tense? Only the first word of a verb tense construction will change according to tense. What is true about the pattern for all perfect verb tenses? All perfect verb tenses use the pattern have plus past participle. What must one first determine when using a perfect tense? Why? Whether or not the main verb is regular or irregular, because that determines the past participle.